It's almost Halloween in the Northern Hemisphere, and I thought I'd do a quick video under this format, which I've been wanting to do for a while, just like not full video essays, but just quick, as the title says, I've been thinking. So, I was thinking for Halloween, everybody's going to do recommendations and reviews for horror movies that you can check out, and I thought about doing the same, but it's a little difficult to come onto my channel where mostly I've been talking about My Little Pony and Sailor Moon and just general girls media, I guess, and then come on here and say, oh, you should watch Hexen, which is a 1922 silent movie from Germany. It's a little hard to just come on here and like make a list like that of horror movies that I genuinely think people should watch, but it's so out of left field, although this whole video is out of left field. But I thought instead I would recommend some videos that are on YouTube by other content creators that are about horror, especially since horror tends to get suppressed in the YouTube algorithm just because advertisers on YouTube, they don't like putting their products on horror material that have like a lot of gore or themes, shall we say. And I thought I would recommend videos that have higher view counts than I have subs, and you can check out some of them. I'm not going to go into videos that I've watched that are too serious in their topics, because there are some videos out there just like about fiction. I'm not even talking about true crime or anything that can get a little bit heavy, and I'm not going to go that hard. But I wanted to recommend 5 of them just because I don't want to talk for an hour again in a short video like this, and you can check them out and see if any of them catches your eye or makes you interested in the content they're talking about, the games or movies or whatever it is. Oh, incidentally, Hexen from 1922, it's up on YouTube for free because it's in the public domain, and I highly recommend that. Either the original or the 1960s one where they had like the music replaced with funk music. It's very strange. M is on YouTube just for free. The original Nosferatu is on YouTube for free. So is the 1979 Nosferatu, which I also highly recommend, but I don't know how to recommend that to anyone. Really, it's like, hey, watch this 70s German movie directed by Werner Herzog about having an existential crisis. But regardless, here are some YouTube videos which you might like if you're into horror or maybe curious about horror. Vinesauce has recently, as in the past week, started a first-time playthrough of Silent Hill 3, and I highly recommend watching that. At the time of recording, there's only been 2 parts out. I've been enjoying it a lot. Vinny is really enjoying the game so far. He doesn't have that big a history with Silent Hill at all, so he's not coming in with all these biases of what he's heard about the games other than they're good. He doesn't know any of the twists, he doesn't know any of the like finer details, and he's going in basically blind, I guess is the best way to say it. But I actually highly recommend his playthroughs.
You can like get some scenes with the blue milk. Oh, that actually really got me. I felt like a thing. I really, I don't like that.
And if you're like me and you get impatient, like you can't wait 2 or 3 days for every new episode, he also did the first Silent Hill last year, and in 2018 he did Silent Hill 2, which is the first game he played in the series, both of which he really enjoyed. I recommend checking those out if you can't wait for episodes of Silent Hill 3, but those I really recommend. And of course, there is yard work happening outside. It's just a straightforward let's play. In Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 2 he was streaming on Twitch, so he's got a running chat going on, but with Silent Hill 3 it's pre-recorded, so it's just him playing the game by itself. The chat didn't really interfere with the previous 2 games, because I know some people are like, oh, you can't play Silent Hill, any of the games, with a running chat. It's something you should play by yourself because of the experience and how intimate that experience is. However, I actually really enjoyed both playthroughs. I think I've watched his Silent Hill 2 playthrough like maybe 3 or 4 times. I would just put it on and let it play. So really highly recommend. Check out his playthrough of Silent Hill 3 that he's just started. Silent Hill 2 is my favorite in the series as far as overall game goes, but Silent Hill 3's main character Heather is my favorite character in the series, and Vinny's been gelling with it. He's been enjoying the content as it is, and he's not like making fun of it, and he really gets it. In Silent Hill 2, which was the first one he played, he was kind of making fun of the dialogue for like the first 20 minutes until he's like, oh, okay, David Lynch, I get it. So yeah, if you're a Silent Hill fan, or if you've been meaning to check out the series but you don't want to play it yourself, which I totally understand, check that out. It's a fun time. It's a great game. It's a great story. It's a great atmosphere. Really good for Halloween. Big recommendation from me.
Generous with the first aid. Rows of wine bottles. I don't really feel like eating and drinking stuff from an alternate reality, okay? All right, I like Heather. Okay. Yeah, no argument here.
Next, I'm going to recommend a channel called Accented Cinema, which is not a horror channel in of itself. However, Accented Cinema did a video, it's about like 15 minutes, it's under 20 at least, so a very quick watch, covering a Japanese, I want to say, the easiest way to explain it is a found footage movie, but that's not really what it is, called Noroi. And I guess mockumentary, like if you know Spinal Tap, where it's presented as if it is a documentary that's been made for television. That's what the film is like. And Accented Cinema, he tends to cover East Asian cinema almost exclusively, or he talks about Hollywood movies produced for the Asian audience, or he talks about how Asian cinema is received in the West, or even what I'm really interested in is he talks about how a lot of cinema is received in China, because he can read Chinese, which I cannot. So listening to him talk about the Chinese perception of films like Kung Fu Panda and what the Chinese social media says about it, that's very interesting to me. But for Halloween, I'm going to recommend his video covering Noroi, because he really goes into why he finds it so terrifying, where other found footage film ironically feels fake. And he compares and contrasts why Noroi works for him in terms of believability, but films like Paranormal Activity don't really. And he also talks about the general mood and atmosphere of Noroi. I think I saw snippets of Noroi before I saw his video essay on it, but I actually wasn't paying that close attention to it because it was in a group chat and things, and I think we were talking instead of watching the screen as we were supposed to. However, watching his review of it, I'm going to sit down and watch it properly. Incidentally, Noroi is up on YouTube for free, more than once, from several people. So if you want to watch the movie after watching Accented Cinema talk about it, you can. It's right there. It's subtitled. There you go. It's just on YouTube. I think it's on Shudder as well, but I don't have access to Shudder in my country. I don't have access to anything in my country besides Netflix, so that's a thing. But yes, check out Accented Cinema, check out his review on Noroi, and if you think that's something that you can stomach or deal with, because it is a little harrowing, Noroi is up on YouTube, so you can just watch it there.
Most horror films create mood by using terrors within our imagination. Seeing a killer standing in the distance, watching someone getting killed, for the vast majority of us, these aren't something we will ever experience. But many of us have heard news of those things. Death of someone, such as your friend's coworker.
Next, I'm going to recommend a channel that you might be aware of, because I think he hits the algorithm a little bit easier, or maybe it's just because of the way that Google has, adjusted the algorithm for me personally, so he gets recommended to me a lot. But anyway, the channel Ragnaroks, who is a horror channel, but specifically for gaming. And I find his content really, really good. He's got the most chill tone, and his tone of voice and the music he chooses. His videos are almost atmospheric in of themselves, if that makes sense. He manages to capture the atmosphere of the kind of horror I really like in his videos, just talking about it. And because his videos are reviews, his videos in of themselves are not scary per se, but he captures the atmosphere that you would get from playing something like Silent Hill or Darkwood, the Fatal Frame series. He really captures that very, very well. And I am going to recommend a video he did, which was the second video of his I watched, which is Solaris and how it influenced Silent Hill 2. And I swear I did not mean to put Silent Hill on this list twice. That was completely by accident. I was actually going to recommend something else from the Ragnaroks until I remembered this video, and I'm like, oh no, I have to recommend this video because it's so fascinating.
It seems as if it tries to communicate by spawning perverted mental projections of the repressed and traumatic memories of its guests, or its hosts, and by that, it makes them face their innermost demons and pushes them to the brink of insanity. Now, you might think I just told you the plot of Silent Hill 2, but that was actually the story of Solaris.
I've been aware of other influences on the Silent Hill franchise, the ones that most people talk about, like the films of David Lynch, as well as the photography of Hans Belmer, and the art of the painter Francis Bacon, and Kindergarten Cop, but I had never really heard about Solaris influencing Silent Hill 2, probably because Solaris doesn't visually resemble Silent Hill 2. I mean, most of the time, but so it's very different in terms of even tone. It's different in tone, it's different in visuals. However, after watching Ragnaroks' video, it makes such clear, obvious sense how Solaris influenced Silent Hill 2. It's absolutely fascinating, and I have never heard anyone else even mention this. So I highly recommend this video, even if you're not into Silent Hill or you've never watched Silent Hill 2, in which case you can watch Vinny's playthrough first. It's just a very fascinating video in terms of how things can influence other things and how things can reference things without it being like the pop culture, hey, I understood that reference kind of humor, and how art begets other art. And very, very fascinating video. Also, I'm not sure how many people are aware of this, but Moss Films, the Russian film company who actually own Solaris and Stalker, both of them Andrei Tarkovsky movies, they're up on YouTube for free by the company themselves. They're just there. I will say I still have to watch Solaris, mostly because of that. But I do plan to. I just that's gonna have to be time I schedule. But in the meantime, highly recommend Ragnaroks' video, highly recommend his other videos as well. Like if you're not really interested in Silent Hill, I recommend the videos he did on Fatal Frame. He's done the first 4 games in the series, including the one that never had a release outside of Japan, and he plans to do Maiden of Darkwater as soon as it's released on the Switch, which at the time of recording it hasn't come out yet. Highly recommend. And also he also with games like Fatal Frame and stuff, and games which it's very difficult to buy them just because the prices are so exorbitant, he will have instructions in his description boxes on how you can get the game running through using archival ROMs and archival ISOs and emulators and such. So generally really, really good. He promotes indie games in the horror genre. He promotes games that have fallen under the radar. Highly recommended, excellent channel.
Just like Maria is not a carbon copy of James's wife, but rather a projection of his idealized rose-tinted memories of her, Kelvin's visitor, as the scientists on Solaris call them, is also shaped solely from the things Kelvin remembers about Harry.
Next, I'm going to recommend a channel called Good Bad Flicks. You might be familiar with this one. They are heavily involved with the by now 3-parter horror movie documentary called In Search of Shadows, which is up on Shudder. The first one alone is like 4 hours long. I haven't seen part 2 and I haven't seen part 3. I have no idea how long that series is at this moment in time. I'm waiting for In Search of Tomorrow. I've been waiting for In Search of Tomorrow for years now. Please. But he did a video on Hocus Pocus, and he goes really into the production of Hocus Pocus and how the film was made and how the actresses made the film and how Disney made the film and how the script was kind of bounced around before it was eventually made. And he goes into how it went from this basically a flop into this adored film that, I mean, I live in South Africa. I watched Hocus Pocus in the 90s. This movie it's one of those sleeper hits in a way that Christmas Story is, I think, where for many, many years, some people would know about it or they would have seen it like once, but it's only in recent time where it's just completely taken off. And it's a really positive video and it's really fun. And what I like about videos like this is it reminds me why I enjoy films that I've already seen. It like reminds me, this is why I find that film so charming. This is why I enjoy it so much. Recommend this video. It's a good time. There's nothing really scary or troubling or anything you need like a content warning for. It's just a live action film by Disney from the 90s. That's kind of the sleeper hit, and it's this feel-good story of how this film has gone from kind of a disappointment in terms of box office to this embraced cultural film. And it's great. Really highly recommend. Really enjoyable.
Winter liked it because it was a modern-day fairy tale. He said, "There really has been no movie like this with a Halloween theme. Usually when you think of Halloween, you think of a horror picture. You don't think of a family picture for Halloween. That's the first thing that attracted me to the project."
And lastly, I'm going to recommend a video from a channel. She's still much bigger than I am, but she's a little smaller than the others I've mentioned, and the channel name is Bess. And she did a video called How Higurashi Scares Us. The full title, Higurashi no Nakakoro ni, has been this massive cultural cornerstone in internet anime fandom since the anime came out in 2006. And even though the anime itself was kind of messy and kind of cheap, it was this really, really breakaway success, kind of spurred on by the Japanese side of the internet at the time, being so enamored with the visual novel, which came first. And what Bess does is she comes from this perspective as somebody who wasn't really into horror at all, and then she played Higurashi and just experiencing the emotions that the visual novel brings out and talking about the themes that the visual novel talks about and going deeper into specifically the original visual novel. She does talk about the anime, she talks about the various incarnations of the story, but she is primarily concerned with the visual novel. And her perspective on it is so incredibly interesting. And it's the video that got me to sit down and play Higurashi, or at least start playing it. At the time of recording, the first chapter of Higurashi is actually up on Steam for free, and I haven't bought the second chapter yet, but I'm 8 hours into the first chapter and I have not finished it yet. And it was Bess's review and talking about it that made me want to sit down and finally put in those hours into playing Higurashi. Because I saw the anime, I think I watched it in 2007 or so, and I only watched the first season. I never watched the second season, so which is kind of like just, you know, half the story. It's like saying, oh, I know the riddle, but I don't know the answer to the riddle. But I never had the motivation or interest to watch the second season, and then I watched this video by Bess discussing the deeper themes of it, and it made me sit down and play 8 hours of the first chapter. Her video is really interesting. However, I am going to put a bit of a content warning if you want to check it out, because Higurashi, it's got this reputation as being extremely violent, and it is very violent, especially the anime, because you're actually seeing what's happening. However, I think that reputation is a bit misleading in terms of why it's a horror story, because simply just being a gore anime does not make you a horror by itself. But Higurashi focuses on themes such as I'm gonna have to say a few things a little vaguely just to avoid YouTube completely blocking this video, but it deals with things like abuse from a very young age. It deals with things like mental illnesses, specifically schizophrenia, and most importantly, not the disease itself. That's not where the horror comes from. It is and it isn't. It's not that stigma of mental illness scary. It's a horror in that it talks about how your reality is shaped by having a condition like that and not being medicated or having any treatment for it. And she also discusses, which was completely new to me and what I found so interesting, the historic landscape of Japan in the 80s, which is when the visual novel takes place, and how they dealt with more severe mental illnesses at the time. And this ties into Japanese folklore in the visual novel, and it ties into these characters who have severe issues, some of them. It deals with certain characters' home situations, which are truly awful. One of the characters' family is actually in the Yakuza, and that is a whole different kind of horror. And the overall visual novel, what I would equate it to is when John Carpenter's The Thing came out. It didn't do very well at the box office. It broke even, but that's not saying much for a movie in the 80s. But it had this reputation of just being a gross out movie that teenagers would dare each other to go and see, which is how I think Siskel and Ebert described it. Is it Ebert or... Yeah, no, it's Ebert, it's not Egbert. Then, in modern days, we still talk about the gore effects, we still talk about the body horror, but in modern day we understand that what makes The Thing so interesting as a horror movie and what makes it one of the best horror movies ever made is the paranoia.
Are you telling the truth? Did your mom really make dinner?
Well, actually, she didn't really make it for me.
You're mean. The only thing you planned on eating tonight was a cup of noodles, right? Ginger and grilled pork flavor, which you bought today at 7th Mart. But that's not enough food for you. You should eat some vegetables with that too. So if you would just let me in, Keiichi. Come on, Keiichi. Open the door.
Just please go. Don't do this.
Keiichi.
Now, Higurashi is very much like that. It's a game or anime or manga or whatever form you're watching it in. I think there's even a live action version of it, although I don't know how you would do it in live action, quite frankly. It is extremely gory and upsetting, but that's not why it's scary. So I just want to prep you, even if you decide to watch Bess's video and you don't plan to watch the anime or play the visual novel yourself, I just want to put that warning out there, that be aware that, you know, watch the Hocus Pocus review maybe instead if that sounds a little bit too difficult for you to sit through, which I'm not going to judge you at all, like seriously.
Higurashi is a story with a heavy focus on realism that still opts to use central fantasy elements, and it evokes the distinct feeling that maybe there really is more to this world than we're aware of. More broadly, Higurashi asks, does something have to be verifiably real to mean something to us?
So yeah, those are my recommendations. I wanted to say one or two other things, which I have a tendency to ramble off topic because I'll think of something and I'll be like, oh, that's really interesting, I need to mention that too. But I'm not going to do that this time because this is just a video on things I was thinking about. I'm hoping to do more of these while I'm doing research for more serious video essays. And in the meantime, I hope you guys have a good Halloween for you in the Northern Hemisphere. It's not really a thing in my country because, first of all, we're going into summer. And second of all, it's just not really a thing here. But I hope you guys have a good Halloween. And I hope that your countries are in situations where you can really enjoy the holiday. And I'll see you next time. I'm still researching the other video, so I'm hoping to get that up eventually. Maybe before the end of the year. Okay, that's all.